Recording now. All right, folks, we're here on a little bit of this, a little bit of that. By the way, that's the name of the podcast, folks. And I'm here with my buddy Jay, present coworker and a previous coworker, Dakota. So, if you guys want to just say a little bit about yourselves, just for the camera, obviously nothing self-incriminating. So, go right ahead and give us a little splash. We'll start with Jay.
Oh, nothing incriminating? Then I may have to stay silent from this point on. So my name is James. I go by Jay, and I've had a variety of experiences in my life. I'm kind of a collector of experiences. I've always appreciated knowledge, especially weird and unusual things, and I think that's why I'm on your podcast today.
Nice, very good. Okay, good to have you, Jay. And then Dakota. Let's splash back. He's been a former podcast guest, so.
My name is Dakota. Relatively young, but I've had some interesting experiences in my life. Experienced some trauma. As some of you may know, my dad took his life when I was 9, and I've learned a lot from that experience. But thinking about that experience and what if life had taken a different course, I wouldn't have even made friends that I have now. I wouldn't be on this podcast right now, and just contemplating those types of things fascinates me. And as Jay said, the collection and the pursuit of knowledge, and as I can best describe it, is the pursuit of truth, whatever that may be in all of its infinite forms. And that's why I guess I'm here on the podcast, to talk about weird, interesting things. As what was it? Terence McKenna said, things are going to get weird, and we have to start talking about the weird things.
I love that you invoked Terence McKenna, dude. That's good. Good intros, guys. All right, so because this is a little just off script here, I'm going to kind of look at this as we go along, push us in the right direction. Today's topic is simulation theory, or simulation hypothesis. There was a famous philosopher named Nick Bostrom. I don't know if it originates with him, but he basically put together an argument that says we might be living in a simulation. And I think that's kind of where we unpack it, is like, what do we call this? What is a simulation? Is it digital? Is it organic in some sense? If we are in some sense inside of a computer, there may be a lot of questions that come with that, like the intent of the person behind the computer, or what it even means to be inside of a computer. So it'd be just general reactions about your understanding of simulation theory. Maybe we'll start there. If we can kick it off to Jay, and then I'll move it back to Dakota after. So.
Well, like I definitely wouldn't call myself an expert on simulation theory, although I know a little bit about it. I've had conversations about it. I probably see it a little bit differently than the scientific model, the hypothesis you're talking about. But I do think that the universe around us is a creation in a similar way to like the Buddhists believe that everything is an illusion created by our senses. That's kind of more of like a simulation theory that I'm talking about. Does that make sense?
In a way, I'd love to get into the weeds a little further, but yeah, I love that start off. That's great, because I also have a Buddhist perspective myself, so I feel like I understand some depth there. But before we do that, let's Dakota, do you have any reactions, and can you offer us your own understanding of simulation theory?
A lot of my perspective is kind of lost because I have a lot of Christianity, specifically Seventh-day Adventism, that I reference quite often. But from there, I've branched, and I would say I lean more toward a Buddhist type perspective on a lot of different things. David, you and I have had a lot of different conversations over the years.
Absolutely.
But the way that I perceive it, whether it's biological or digital or whatever, it's from our perspective, quantum at the end of the day. And that's the magic term that you can use to cover a lot of different things. But the questions that I have isn't necessarily what's the intent behind the creator per se, because we're all the way down here. But rather, where are the underlying systems, and how do we properly interact with them to do things such as we see superheroes do, real magic? How do we interface with that? And my intuition tells me it's somewhere within consciousness, but
Do you have something
I don't
to?
know how to get there.
No,
Nice.
I agree with that. Yeah, I completely agree with that. It is within our consciousness. That's kind of what I'm talking about. Is my version of the simulation theory is we are creating that by experiencing reality with our consciousness. Um, I didn't really have to. No, keep going, man. You're doing great. I just wanted to.
That's
I'm right
good.
with you on that.
Nice. Um,
But I wouldn't say that my view is rooted in the classical mainstream scientific perspective either, because a lot of the guys in academia, whether it's archaeology, looking at the history of humanity itself, the history of Earth, its young Earth creationist, anyone within the realm of science, it's safe to label science as a religion because it has turned into one. It has turned into people who have generated hypotheses, and they have gotten so much funding in the pursuit of proving those hypotheses correct, but they can't quite prove them. But they keep preaching it, they keep getting more funding, and it's a money making scheme at this point. You've got pride and ego tied up in it, and if you've built this kingdom and built on top of this house of cards, and the truth, the pursuit of the truth, destroys that house of cards, that's an entire economy that collapses. Therefore, we have to suppress or at least misdirect by not properly educating people and instead indoctrinating them. So the truth isn't found because the economy is going to collapse when that happens.
so I want to break here
I think
just to. Oh, go ahead, Jay. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I think that there are people out there doing genuine scientific work, but I do agree that some people worship it like a religion. I don't think science is a religion. I think some people look at it that way. I think the true spirit of
Yeah.
science is always pursuing truth, and that's kind of like the opposite of religion. But completely correct. Some people are unwilling to give up on their preconceived notions and will miss out on truth because of it.
I have to
It's
agree with both
that
of you on that too.
unique ability to die on a hill for some reason.
Hmm.
It's like people
Yeah, right.
can't have. We're living walking paradoxes, and for some reason, people are terrified of that, and they're so terrified of that they choose to die on hills.
Yeah.
I think the world is more beautiful than it is all paradox. It's
Agreed.
chaos is beautiful if you look at it, right?
When you look at just philosophy, Western philosophy in general, that's a little my background. I got a BA in philosophy, and I did the whole history of from Aristotle to modern day. And there's so many different what they would say are unresolved issues in Western philosophy that I feel that when you look at Eastern takes on solutions to a lot of these issues, like free will, like what is reality, I do really think that it shows it to be a paradox, and in a way, either depending on your perspective, an unresolvable paradox, or one that just you have to make sense of contradiction in a different way. And I think that's something that Buddhism does rather well, is that it shows the harmony of opposites. But not to take us too astray on that, I want to focus us back on simulation theory for a second, because the keynote philosopher here is Nick Bostrom, that puts forth his argument. So what I want to do briefly is just read to you guys the syllogism. So the syllogism is, I'm sure you guys already might be aware, is like premises to a conclusion. And I had ChatGPT do this so I didn't screw it up. But anyways, it basically lays out his argument in a way where we can kind of dig into the premises and conclusion and just kind of get your guys' reaction. So I'm going to quickly read that. Premise one is if it is possible for a civilization to reach a level of technological advancement where it can create highly realistic simulations, it is likely that such civilizations will create many simulations. Premise two. Well, let's pause there. What do you guys think about that one? Well, let's take it one at a time.
Hey, that makes sense because they're not going to just perfectly create one the first time. There's going to be a whole evolutionary cycle of these things being built up. So of course they're going to make tons of these things.
Yeah.
They're going to keep trying to improve and improve and improve.
Any reactions, Dakota?
Why was it?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
If you've ever played any video games like Dwarf Fortress or anything like that, it's that concept right there. And I mean, when we discovered the digital world, we became obsessed. We were already obsessed with games, but we became really obsessed with games. We've created an entire culture around that. And in a lot of those games, they're just simulations. And then you put yourself in, like Dwarf Fortress. And how many people, you go on YouTube, there's a lot of people who train neural networks, train a neural network to walk, running simulation after simulation after simulation. And if you're trying to fine tune a very particular wavelength, for a lack of a better term, then you need to set up your emitters properly. And your emitters need to be in the proper frequency. And it's going to take a lot of fine tuning to get it there to have a universe or whatever this is, a projection, a model, be created. You have to have a lot of information there. And the only way to do that is either the universe itself, and all the simulations are simulations of some physical machine that something built, or it is the thing itself. And it always has been the thing, the simulation. And it's just simulation all the way down. Pick your poison.
That's what I tend to believe.
So to give an go ahead, Jay. Sorry.
One thing like with the simulation theories that I differ with a little bit is that it kind of still places this outside force that creates that simulation, making us kind of like a just a player within the game, like an NPC, right? But I don't really see it that way. I think we're the player. We're part of that creation. It's not something created around us that we can't control. We're part of the creator playing a character, like we talked about Dungeons and Dragons earlier, right? We're the character,
right?
But the simulation is not beyond our control because we're also the player.
So I'm gonna read
that makes sense.
That makes sense. That makes sense to me. I wanted to read a quick example. That's going to kind of solidify the premise and also echo some of the remarks both of you made. So for an example of the premise would be humanity already creates virtual realities and simulations like video games and VR worlds, or like Dungeons and Dragons, like you said, right? If technology advances exponentially, future civilizations could create simulations that are indistinguishable from reality. And I think that's the key point, is it being indistinguishable. I'm gonna move on to premise 2. If many simulations are created, the number of simulated realities would vastly outnumber the single base reality. So, for example, imagine there's one quote-unquote real world, but millions of virtual worlds designed for research, entertainment, or other purposes. The simulated worlds would far outnumber the physical reality. I'll stop there for a second. So, any reactions to that second premise?
We're talking about Crisis on Infinite Earths. That's what it is.
Yeah.
There was a prime universe, and now there's a multiverse, and the question then becomes: should it be one whole? Is it a whole? Are all of the simulations and sub-simulations connected? Are there firewalls? Are there admin passwords and identities to get past those firewalls?
I like the analogy to computers. That's good. Yeah.
I can tell you're an engineer. Yeah. Here's my question is if all the simulated realities, regardless of how many they are, if they're all simulations of real reality and you've only ever lived in the simulated version, in what way is that different from reality to you?
Nice.
Like,
that's a good question.
Know it's wet. In the same way, a fish doesn't know it's wet, right? Like, because this is reality. We could be living in the janky 8-bit version of reality right now. We would not know it.
It's like World of Warcraft. you've
Right.
got a lot of people on one server, but there might only be so many people per instance until another instance has to be made. But the instance shares the same physical space, shares the same time, but the players don't even see each other because they're on different instances. For a lack of a better term, they're operating at a different frequency.
And they could be playing the game on different graphical like fidelity
Mhm.
levels too. So the game, even though they're looking at the exact same thing, looks completely different on each other's screen.
Yep.
I love that. I love that, guys. I like where this is going. This is good, and this is perfect. This pulls us to premise 3 and then conclusion. So, premise 3: if simulations vastly outnumber the base reality, then statistically, the likelihood of being in a simulation is much higher than being in the base reality. So, for example, if you were randomly dropped into a world without any prior knowledge, the odds would favor landing in one of the many simulations rather than the single base reality. So, I'll just really quick get to the conclusion. We are likely living in a simulation unless advanced civilizations. Let me read that again. We are likely living in a simulation unless advanced civilizations never reach such a stage or choose not to create these simulations. There's an analogy, and I'll save it for a second, but let's just focus on that for a second. So that's the conclusion, that we're living in a simulation unless those two conditions are met. They never made a simulation, or what was the other one? The advanced civilizations never got technologically capable. So, what do you guys think of that?
Who cares? It doesn't actually make a difference at all, because whether this is a simulation or reality, it makes absolutely no difference. So I'm just going to choose which whenever of those options feels the most fun in my brain and run with that.
Well, that was actually something I was thinking of opening with, and that's a very good point, Jay. Because here's a question: suppose it's true for a moment that we're simulated. I mean, why does it? I mean, does it really matter to us? I mean, how do they phrase it? If it's all simulated, does it even matter as long as it feels real to us? Like, I feel like that.
If we,
What matters is the
if you found out,
experience.
yeah, if right now you found out it was revealed that everything is a simulation, it's always been a simulation. So every experience you've ever had, everything you've ever done, every place you've ever been is just as real now as it always has been.
Okay, but suppose for a moment, because just to kind of take us a little further now, that it really, yeah, you're right. It doesn't matter that we're in a simulation because the experience is all that ever really mattered. But suppose we were just those mathematically curious humans that were like, well, I just want to know whether or not I'm in one or not in one. Does it change anything else besides the character of how we feel? Is there anything unique about that has any real world implications on our lives besides just the lived experience? Does that make sense? Um,
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I mean, if you're a truth seeker, um, then you want to know the truth. And it's the same thing for like I think when somebody who's had some challenges in their life because of let's say like a mental health condition that they have, to finally get diagnosed with it does feel like relief to a lot of those people just to finally know. But whatever belief makes you happy. Like if you believe it's a simulation, you're going to look at the world in one way. If you believe it's reality, you're going to look at it in another way. So just choose the belief that makes you the happiest. If it doesn't change the outcome, make the experience as enjoyable as possible.
nice. So I do want to go and pursue one implication about the intentions of the creator. But before I do, Dakota, did you have any reactions to that?
My mind is just sitting here going, all right, if it's a simulation of reality, how is that achieved? Are they manipulating space-time to create parallel dimensions, pocket dimensions, things like that? That's where my mind ends up going. The engineering side of things, of how it could be achieved, and how does a biological consciousness interact with it, or a quantum consciousness interact with it? Because that's the important thing, because to be able to interact it's the equivalent of someone in the sandbox going up to the edge and trying to get out of the sandbox, and the parents come back and they say, no, you can't leave the sandbox, you got to go back in. So what happens when you go to the door and you knock, and at what level of technology or what level of consciousness or what right ritual of shamans getting together and projecting their consciousness and having an astral experience where they go and there's something they interact with and it goes, hey, the humans on Earth have finally got a group together that have knocked. What are we going to do? And what happens when you knock?
Answer. They're going to answer. They're waiting for us. But you can't knock on the door until you believe there's a door to knock on. And people would rather just play in the dirt.
So, assuming that we're in a simulation, one thing that gets me is the power source. So, like, so we're here in this very organic feeling reality, and we know what it was like in our evolutionary history to create a computer. And now we can imagine what it's like if that computer gets so sophisticated that we can create other worlds that other NPCs could wake up and be like, "Whoa!" So. And then to wonder about whether they're in a simulation. But if we think about the just the fact that us organic, naturally evolving beings eventually found the wherewithal within our material resources around us to create a computer. I mean, I tend to wonder that if we're in a simulation, did they have a similar evolutionary history? I mean, are we in literal computers as we know them digitally, underpinned by a substrate of electricity? Are they tapping into a mainframe of some kind? If I can actually, I don't know if I'm kind of pushing us in a direction that makes sense here. I hope it is, but I wonder about the substrate. I wonder about, we're organic, so isn't there some kind of like weird paradox of like other?
But our consciousness is electromagnetic and electrochemical. So even if it is silicon-based life or carbon or any other type of life, hell, the sun is a big ball of electromagnetic energy. Such complex, so much chaos, more chaos happening in the sun, I guarantee you, than what happens in the neuron interactions up here in our head. So is the sun a player in the simulation as well? If it's a consciousness, that's a question. And so is that the first thing you knock on? Or ideally, the Schramm resonance, is that how it's pronounced? I don't remember. That's been essentially scientifically proven and agreed upon that yes, the Earth and all life in Earth's biosphere generally operates at a certain frequency. Is it 8 hertz, I think? It's been a while since I've read up on it. So, are you supposed to connect with Gaia first by getting your own frequency in order, and then Gaia helps you connect to the next neighbor, which would be the sun, and the sun would then connect you with the interstellar neighborhood, and then from there to the center of the galaxy, and then galactic cluster, and then whatever else there is toward the singularity, toward the source of it all. Is that how it works?
Well, all those things are all connected too. Like, so it's I'm gonna take it into quantum theory a little bit. So I forget what it's called, where anytime that like two things are connected, no matter how far apart they are, they stay connected.
Quantum entanglement.
Spooky action at a distance, I think is what Einstein called it. But if everything was a singularity, like in the Big Bang, then everything that exists has already been connected to one another, meaning it can never be unconnected. So what I'm saying is, what if that interaction between two things which have been connected, no matter how far they are apart in the universe, which means they actually can interact with each other at faster than the speed of light. What if those things are connected through consciousness? And what if all of this is just consciousness?
I tend to take that perspective, by the way.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah. I tend to take that perspective. Not to take us too off track here, but I tend to believe that there's in philosophy there's this view called panpsychism, and I'm not sure if this is the right doctrine to hold. Are you familiar with Jay and Dakota?
I've heard of it.
Yeah. It's the view that consciousness is not something that is a derivative of reality. It's not something that happened along our evolutionary history. It took years for brains to evolve, and then brains created consciousness.
But it's a fundamental force.
of physics, and that it
Yeah.
kind of it lays behind, and that depending on how far your panpsychism goes, you might say that most or everything in this universe, physical universe, it has some humdrum level of consciousness, and that's kind of a fudge word because it limits our understanding of consciousness is obviously relative to the apparatus that we have. So I mean, we're used to thinking of the five senses, and beyond that our meditative sort of awareness, but if we go backwards and we start stripping away our vision, our hearing, our senses, and our sense of, I mean, I think we get to a bare sense of awareness, but then we lack an imagination of before. So if we're thinking about like a mitochondria or an early eukaryote of a bacteria, or even before that, you have to imagine that if it's all conscious, then there might be some sense of, we have to imagine something, maybe awareness or maybe something like awareness. But like, anyway, I tend
You
to
are
think
the spoon.
like the Matrix, right?
Yeah.
Like
You are the spoon.
You're no different than the objects literally around you. So, but I mean, there's a sense in which there's interconnection and interdependence, but there's also a sense of me seeing through my eyes and not through your eyes, me hearing through my ears and not through your ears. So there's distinction, and yet it's not separation. In some larger sense, this is where I take the Buddhist sense to be true, is that there's this inseparability. So if we're all interconnected, doesn't mean that we're all seeing through the same eyes or thinking each other's thoughts. Maybe we could. Maybe that telepathy experience you had, Dakota, is possibly something that comes along for the ride under the right substance. I tend to think of the brain more as an antenna than actually like if you put in the right substance in it, you might actually be tuned to another frequency of reality that is already probably there.
Yeah.
So
100%.
Yeah, so I mean, it sounds like we're all non-dualists. Sounds like we're all kind of in the same thinking. It's just kind of crazy. We assembled quite a podcast. Not a lot of differences here, but that's good. That's actually interesting. But
It's an hour-long conversation with everybody just going, I agree.
I agree. Yeah,
I agree. Right.
But take David Chalmers. I'm going to go off script for a little bit. It's a little more fun. David Chalmers, he's another philosopher. You guys may have heard of him. He coined the idea of the hard problem of consciousness and relative soft, the lesser hard problem of consciousness. And the lesser hard problem of consciousness is not to say it's not hard. It's still pretty difficult, relatively speaking. That just implies function and the study of the actual brain and the mechanism behind how consciousness works, but it doesn't actually explain why. The why question behind, that's the hard problem of consciousness. The why redness has the character it has and not another character. Why does the redness of red appear that way and not green? Why does sounds appear to my ears in this way and not in a different way? And that we don't even have the basis for a theory to model off of that yet. It's so easy to talk about mechanism. We could talk about cognitive science, and we could talk about psychology, and we could try to grapple the brain from a mechanistic standpoint. But if we go one level deeper, we kind of hit a wall, and that's the hard problem. So anyways, I bring up Chalmers because he brings up this idea of automatons, and he says, imagine that we're just to figure out something that contrasts something that's conscious. Imagine you have a person that walks like a human, talks like a human, says ouch when you pinch it, but then underneath there's really, the lights are not on. And they're just, and in a sense, it's kind of like what we imagine AI robots. We have to wonder, are the lights on? When I turn them off, are we doing something immoral, or are we committing their death? Or is there some lights going on inside? Is there some consciousness in there, we might say? So yeah, I like the idea of automatons as a nice contrast to a conscious being, but it stands as a theoretical construct. It's not to say that it's out there in the world for us to find, but if there are philosophical zombies, another word for that, then where are they and who are they? Are they the computers? Are they the AI that are now AGI? Or are they the
that guy, man? They're all over town. You see them all day long. They're just operating on pure subconscious, not a brain in their head. just plugging through life, doing as they're told, clocking in and clocking out, driving to work, driving home. It's us most of the time when we're not talking about this stuff.
Well, that's
what we have to do to survive in the world that's been created, unfortunately.
And
and it's exhausting.
Yeah, wear the mask all day long and play the part.
So, I'm tempted to take it further, but I'm going to back up just a little bit. I'm curious. Can you anticipate any counter arguments to the Nick Bostrom argument that we're in a simulation? At this point now, having dug pretty deep into it, could we think of any visas?
Jesus.
Oh. Say more, Dakota, because that's tongue in cheek.
I'm just saying a creationist, but then the conversation can very quickly be shifted to, okay, you're saying that it was created. I'm saying it could have been created. It's a simulation. We're just using different terminologies, talking about the same exact thing in process, and one person's getting angry that the other person's using different terminology.
So it's more linguistic at bottom, is the idea?
It's a linguistic misunderstanding because, at least in my experience, a lot of religions are absolutely terrified of the mystical experience. It's as if these religious structures have been set up to suppress the mystical experience. I've got friends who are Christians, and I mention Christian mysticism, and he's like, Christian mysticism doesn't exist. I'm like, it does exist. You should do some reading on it.
Do you have something to say there, Jay?
Jesus was the greatest wizard that ever lived.
I'm gonna break from script again because I got to say something about that. That's really good. I know, Dakota, you're familiar with Alan Watts.
Dies.
And, oh.
I
said, and Dumbledore dies.
Oh, I know. Oh, spoiler alert.
That was truly tragic.
Maybe he comes back like Dumbledore the White later on, or something like that.
Is that merging into Lord of the Rings now?
I think that's Star Trek. I'm not sure.
Battlestar.
But I want to kind of take us off simulation for a second. I think we did some justice on simulation. I think I can bring up a lot of these other talking points, but I think we ran the gambit unless you guys have interesting points, but to pursue. But I want to talk about Jesus for a second since you brought him up, and Alan Watts, because he has a unique perspective. And I know, Dakota, we did a podcast about this a few podcasts ago. It's been a while, but I think, Jay, have we talked about Alan Watts? Are you familiar with who he is a little bit?
I saw that video that you sent me, and I've definitely heard the name, but I would not say I have a real breadth of knowledge of the guy.
And Dakota, I remember from our conversations, you're definitely familiar. So I'll
been a while, but yeah, I'm familiar with the general. I'm familiar with the big picture. Let's put it that way.
So he was a British-born citizen that came to America. He was a philosopher most of his life. He started as a Jesuit priest. He had a very strong understanding of the Bible. A lot of just biblical literature. He was very good at quoting it, in fact. And he ended up finding Buddhism, and he ended up becoming a Western mouthpiece for it, and he really popularized it in the 70s. And he died in 73, in fact. But I bring him up because he has an interpretation of Jesus that I find truly remarkable. I don't hear talked about enough, but he says that if it's true that he historically existed, which he doesn't really have a lot of skepticism on that front, so maybe he did exist, or maybe some person with a similar, where the stories point to, whether it's not just a name, existed. He says, well, it's very possible that even like Siddhartha Buddha and other people of around the world, around Jesus and his contemporaries, may have had a cosmic experience, something that's equivalent to what happens when we drop acid or LSD, a sense of oneness of the universe and self. That it may be possible that what happened with Jesus is that he was caught up in the language of his time, and it was the Romans that ended up turning the religion into more of a state religion as they conglomerated in the Council of Nicaea, and as they started editing the books from the Old to the New Testament. It's very possible that what he was trying to say was and he points to Psalms. If I screw this up, I'm sorry, but I think it was John chapter 10, I think verses like 10 through 20. No, sorry, 20 to 30 talks about how remember the whole casting the stone, the first stone, parable. Well, there's a line in there where, and I won't be able to quote it verbatim, but anyway, the gist of it was that he was saying, what if, in fact, what Jesus was saying is that really the notion of God is not one being out there like a monarchy, like a king among a bunch of people, but more like a democracy where everybody wakes up to the fact that they're God, like the cultures in India and in the Near East. A lot of the Hindus and the Buddhists of the ancient past, a lot of their cultures, he would say, are very welcoming to people that find out later on in life that, oh my God, I am one with the universe, and in a sense, I am God, in that, and only in that sense. And so it's a democratized notion of God as opposed to like a monarchical kind of sense of that there's only one and nobody else is. And so that was so blasphemous at the time that it became. I see you shaking your head, Jay. Talk to me, man. What's going on?
Both characters that you're referring to here, both Buddha and Christ. Those are not their names. Those are titles that you achieve. Those are states of being. Jesus and Siddhartha were guys. Christ and Buddha were states of mind.
Oh, okay. Well, my mistake. Yeah, I used those words incorrectly.
I know. I'm just. I don't think either one of them intended to be deified. They wanted to be examples of how to be. Maybe I didn't phrase that correctly, but
isn't that what go forth and spread the gospel means? Just by living your life style the way that you've been taught to achieve this particular inner state, people are going to ask you, why do you do this? And you tell them, and then they too achieve that inner state as they adopt the lifestyle. Instead, the church shoves their dogma down people's throats.
Well, like you said earlier, that like they don't want you to know that. No, they don't want you to have your own mystical experience, because then you wouldn't need them anymore. I think the state did come along and create the religion behind Christ in a way that controlled people. I don't think Jesus would have liked that at all, though.
All right.
That same state destroyed all of the psychedelic rituals of the Greeks.
Now that I'm not too familiar with, about them having experiences with psychedelics back then. Is that true?
Oh yeah. If you what is the name of that book by Brian Marescu? The Immortality Key. Think he's an archaeologist. I can't remember, but he and a bunch of other people have been studying a lot of these psychedelic rituals that took place during Greece. During the ancient Greek times. It happened quite often. They found artifacts with the materials, with psychedelic compounds in them.
I believe there's evidence that even like quote unquote cavemen were taking some form of psychedelics. Like even animals today, like dolphins mess with blowfish.
Dolphins and certain lemurs.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Living creatures like getting wasted. I'm not.
It's full circle back to Terence McKenna. Is this the stoned ape theory that he puts forward about like ancient cavemen may have first dibble-dabbled with psychedelics just in their natural environment, something like that?
Cause their brains to become more complex over time.
Dang, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hodgepodge at this point, gentlemen. Where shall we go from here? I think we've exhausted Jesus and simulation theory.
Well, yeah, the light subjects, right?
We have a what?
The light subjects. Now let's get into some deep stuff.
Oh yeah, yeah. now that we got rid of the surface stuff, right? Let's see. Free will?
Right, yeah. The small talk. I'm against it.
Well, let's pause.
I don't believe it's true or anything. I'm just against it.
Pulling us back to simulation theory just a little bit, but to kind of nuance it and get it deeper. What is how does it connect to free will? Because I feel like there's an angle there that we can head into. If we frame it like this, I guess I'm in a simulation. I mean, does it have an impact on our ability to control the world around us? what do we think about free will? Let's open that can of worms for a second to get a little deeper. And I do have a little poison here too.
Huh?
Yeah. This is
Free will
oh,
is
that's
the choices we make along the journey. That's all free will is. Everyone has the same destination. Everyone has the same beginning. That's predetermined.
And I know
But you
that
make different choices along the way. But are those
But a
choices ultimately
determinist
free
would-
will? That's the question.
Yeah, the determinists would just say the choices you had to make along the way.
Like cells in the body going after a foreign invader or doing some other natural process.
Yeah, I don't know really where I sit on free will because I see logical points on both sides because sometimes you can make choices which are a detriment to you, but you would only do that for a reason, so you'd still be gaining something from it. I don't know.
well, I know there's when
I
we
would
talk.
like to think we had free will.
Yeah. As far as I understand free will, I know there's one notion of it called the libertarian sense of free will, and I believe this is typically the most subscribed to version of it, and that's that if you could imagine the world like a recording device, and we're able to rewind every atom backwards, if we have some notion of linear time, and we were to rewind to a previous state where we had made a choice to have a ham sandwich or not have a ham sandwich, that if we hit play after rewinding, no matter what sense of freedom we had to not have it or to have it, we would have been locked in for the ride to have whatever outcome actually happened. So if you had the ham sandwich and you rewound yourself, you would end up having that ham sandwich. Even and the illusoriness would be that you could actually choose otherwise, that you could have not had the ham sandwich. So that would be the libertarian notion of it. And I don't subscribe to that theory. I think I mean there's a sense in which that's very it's a powerful notion. But I think I agree with the point you made, Jay. Determinism kind of wrestles that notion by saying, well, I mean, if you just go down into the, well, I'm sorry. What I described was the debunking of libertarian free will. The free will is actually, yes, I could choose. So I'm sorry, I kind of mixed everybody up there. you could choose, but the determinist would say that you only have one direction in there, right? So I think this ultimately gets resolved in an Eastern framework, but let me say that much right now.
Or a multiverse where there's one reality where you chose the sandwich and one where you didn't.
Okay, that's definitely a way out. There's multiverses, and if you think of the whole thing, I mean, I guess we would get into the sense of personal identity as which one is you, because there might be two
You're
Davids.
all of them.
And then if we get even deeper,
Isn't that achieving the ultimate self? You are all of the possibilities that you could have made in life. How do you embody that?
Whoever is asking the question is the real one, and so is every other one asking that question too. They're all real.
They're all real. What do you guys think of parallel universes? Is that real? Is that actually physically, scientifically proven? As to your understandings?
According to the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Doctor Strange has already proved that like 3 times.
Excuse me, I forgot Doctor Strange.
Yeah, a lot in the scientific community, I wouldn't say accepts it, but leans toward, that could be a very good possibility, for sure.
They're getting on board. Yeah, it's a growing theory as far as I understand it, and I like it, so I roll with it.
A little off topic. Have you guys seen the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once?
Not yet, but I've heard I need to. Yeah.
Now that one really goes up this direction nicely. I love that movie because
that's what I was saying, connecting to all of yourselves simultaneously. How do you do that? Because it's all you. They're all real. It's all the same consciousness operating at the same frequencies or similar enough frequencies.
So if we take either a myopic version of you or an expanded universal sense of you, I like Alan Watts' it makes sense of both the myopic and the universal sense of self. As his definition of free will is, you are free to the extent that you know who and what you really are. And to the extent you know what you really are, well, if you're one with the universe and you know that you are, and that you're everything, and you're every physical manifest or parallel universe's version of yourself, including the one that you're in, the base layer, then to the extent you know what you are, there's a sense of freedom there. And he talks about freedom from the sense of karma, not to bring in another can of worms, but that's another concept that's very intertwined with this. You guys familiar with different understandings of karma? Because I know that one gets cashed around a lot. There's different versions of it. There's some that I don't agree with. What do you guys understand about karma, out of curiosity?
That most people get it wrong. There's a layman's understanding of karma, and then there's actually what karma means. It's not just the bad stuff that happens when you do bad stuff. It's right. The reaction to everything that you do. It just means the reaction of putting something out into the universe.
I love that. Yes. And the doing and the happening is another way I like to think about it, is them being one and the same. I mean, if you ask yourself, what am I? I would say that you're not just the voluntary side of yourself, you're also the involuntary. So, the fact that your heart beats doesn't seem like it's very much you because you're not doing it. There's a voluntary sense in which we tend to, I think maybe it's the ego. It's the sense of self that we tend to identify with as we grow into life under many cultures, I suppose, where we tend to identify ourselves with the part of life that we control, but the part of life that we don't control, we don't tend to think of as us. So, I'm beating my heart doesn't really sound like it's me, but I'm talking does feel like it's me because I feel like I'm actively taking control.
Everybody is stuck from a main character perspective.
Yeah, we all have main character syndrome.
Yeah.
But other cultures have less so of it, though. Like more communal cultures have less so of it. But then they're also like more tribal.
Yeah.
I feel like it's possible to maintain that extreme individual identity within a greater connected whole. I don't see why it wouldn't be possible. You just have to, that individual identity has to have enough acceptance and trust to have ego death when ego death needs to occur, because that ego needs to shut up for a moment.
It's hard for Westerners because we're taught that we're number one, and we're look out for ourselves and the heck with everybody else. Which I think it's really hard for Westerners. But you can be a part of any group you identify with. If you only identify with yourself as a strict individualist, then everybody is essentially sus, right? But if you see yourself as part of a group of friends or a neighborhood or a town, you can keep expanding that vision until you're a part of everybody that is. And then maybe we can get some things done.
There's
an individual perspective. Could we call karma a metric by which we could measure the health of a community?
Like whether their overall karma is trending up or down? Yeah, that was probably fair.
If there's more crime and a lot more death or negative experiences, it's difficult to put positive and negative on things because there's just so much, and sometimes you need those negative experiences to wake up and to have a different way of thinking. But
there's an analogy that I really enjoy that kind of gets to this, which is a microscope. I forgot who it was on a Sam Harris podcast. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Sam Harris. He's a popular neuroscientist, philosopher these days. He had a Buddhist on his podcast, and I forget something Goldman. I think his name was Goldman. He gives an analogy of a microscope where we try to imagine the ego at one level, at the societal level, and a spiritual sense of oneness at a microscopic level, and that it's all one reality. But at what level are you magnified into it? Because at one level, it's like it dissipates. It's like it's all one, and that's when we zoom right into the nature of the fabric of reality, if you might. And as we zoom out and at the sort of base layer that we all operate under at the individualistic level, you tend to notice that people can't help but to identify with all kinds of associations, like their tribe, their political identification, their gender, their ethnicity, whatever. I mean, so at one level, the ego makes sense because we kind of use it as a social currency to kind of interact with each other and to kind of societally, function. But at another level, it dissipates, and it's like it's a truth that can be true at one level, and yet at another level, it seems opposite. Like there's this, and I like that Alan Watts kind of puts a spin on this, that is to say that it's not the spirit. One spiritual truth about reality is not to deny the ego or to try to find that it doesn't somehow exist, but to just realize that it's illusory at one level. But at another level, it can simultaneously be the case that it's completely, it dissipates.
There's more than one path to the source.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, many ways to the center. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and at this point, I've lost all substance to know where to go to. So we arrived at the center, and namaste now. So
there has been a little of that.
Well, thank you, Jay. To give it a little irony to this podcast, it has been a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and unless we should pursue any other routes here, I think we can call it a cast. What do you guys think?
Sounds good. That was fun.
Yeah. Hey, that was good. I'm glad at short notice you're able to join, Dakota. Jay, I know we've been trying to set this up, and we finally have, so I'm really excited to rewatch this. And this was good. I feel like I learned a lot just listening to the both of you interact with me on this. So any final thoughts before we exit?
Whether we record or not, we should definitely continue this conversation some other time. That was a lot of fun.
Hey, nice.
Agreed.
All right, so with that, on that cue, we'll head back to Desperate Housewives, and I'll see you guys later. All right, guys, well, it's been real.
See you guys.
Take care.